Hey guys, so you read the title correctly. Heralds are back. Well, sort of. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. Today, I wanted to go over my new build, the Glacial Lance Deadeye. Now, originally, when everything first came out in Dawn of the Hunt, I was actually very interested in Glacial Lance, but it really seemed like nobody was making any builds with the Glacial Lance, and as time went on, most people were using Glacial Lance just for single target for their Lightning Spear builds, and nobody was doing it as like a general mapper. And it made kind of, good sense. I think Glacial Lance suffers from one big problem in that it doesn't have very good clear, especially when you compare it to something like Lightning Spear. Now, there was a build originally made by somebody named Fast AF. I'll link their video in the description below if you want to check that one out, where they did use Glacial Lance for clear, but unfortunately, as I mentioned, the skill itself is just not very good because it doesn't really fork or anything like that. I think it can chain off of like terrain, but really, you don't really want to use chain with Glacial Lance, like, or with any ability, to be honest. But that's besides the point. It just didn't seem like there was really a way to make Glacial Lance work for clear unless you were just throwing out a million spears and just trying to cover as much area as possible with that little tiny area of effect. But yesterday, I stumbled upon a build by Sarge, and it was a Shattering Palm Monk build where he took advantage of a really cool interaction where you would put Voltaic Mark on cast on freeze, and you'd also run Herald of Lightning, and you'd put Cold Infusion on Herald of Lightning and Glaciation, much like what you would use, what you used to do with the old Herald setup to make it do cold damage. Now, what would happen is he would use Shattering Palm. It would freeze enemies. It would pop Voltaic Mark from cast on freeze. Then it would shock enemies because when Voltaic Mark explodes, it does a Nova of lightning damage that has a high chance to shock. Then those enemies would get killed, and then you would proc Herald of Lightning. Herald of Lightning would kill the enemies using some cold damage. It would freeze them, and then it would basically cascade over and over again, essentially giving you the same thing as Herald of Ice, Herald of Thunder from last season. I thought this was super, super cool. I'm like, wait a second. If we have a freezing ability in Ice or Glacial Lance, and it has a very bad ability to clear, but we can use this to basically bolster our clear, I think we can make this build work. And that is how we came upon this build of the Glacial Lance Deadeye. Now, let's take a look at the character and we'll go into a little bit and just more detail. So right now, this is Mommy Viper again. This was my Spiral Volley character, but I repurposed it for Glacial Lance just because I was kind of done with Spiral Volley. I still like the build a lot, but I want to try something else without having to level up another character. So we repurposed that character into the Glacial Lance build. Our stats are as follows. Dex is 215, Int is 194, so it's going to be a very stat-heavy build. As a result, we'll have a lot of attributes on our gear. Survivability is not that great. I don't have like good equipment right now. We can get its survivability a little bit higher, maybe 2-point-something K energy shield if we were able to invest in it. But at the moment, our survivability is pretty paper thin because I didn't spend much money on the gear. It really was a kind of a last minute scrap together character. We have 301 spirit, 879 mana. Mana doesn't really matter too much. Running 75 evasion, have maxed out resist on everything except for lightning. Honestly, this is like 2 points, doesn't really matter too much. And if I were to just, again, get better gear, we could easily cap this out. And I guess while we're on the topic of equipment, here is our current setup. So we have Tangle Tongue as our main weapon. I currently have a Takaba on it for crit damage and skill speed on the other one. Maybe I might end up doing a double skill speed setup. I'm not entirely sure because Glacial Lance is a fairly slow attacking ability, but I just want to put the Takaba in there to help out with the damage a little bit. So that's what we have set up right now. You could do a double Takaba, you could do a double skill speed. Either one works in my opinion. You can also do cold damage on here. Takaba is going to be the highest damage ceiling, so if you want to run 2 of those, that's kind of like the best damage for this ability and this build. So we're running a Tangle Tongue. It's nothing special, just a 18% crit chance, or I guess 23% crit chance. Tangle Tongue with a double socket corrupt. We also have our helmet here, nothing special for survivability. We have a Omen Scepter to give us a little bit more crit. We put a little bit of increased spirit there. That way we can run a little bit extra spirit gems. And we have strength and intelligence there. I think if you want to like make it perfect, I guess, just as high spirit as possible, strength and intelligence, then a attribute reduction on there would be like the best in slot for this. Of course, if we have the chicken leg, right, the Sacred Flame, that would be the best for this build, but that is very, very expensive, and I don't really have the ability to buy that. We are using the Beacon of Aziz. Probably a lot of you guys who are playing Lightning Spear is going to be very familiar with this. Make sure our critical hits ignore enemy resistances, and we allocate and anoint Storm Charged on there, which on our tree is this node right there. When we deal a critical hit, it makes us do more elemental damage and increases our critical hit chance. It's a pretty good anoint, but there's a couple of other options I can go over later when we go on the tree. Armor, nothing special, just for survivability. You want to have an energy shield evasion rating armor. You can definitely get higher than this, but it'll be pretty expensive. I think I paid like 1 or 2 div for this. This might have been my most expensive item on my character. And then for your rings, you're going to want to get as much flat damage as possible. Prioritize physical, prioritize cold. So we have a T9 cold and T9 physical on this. And then the other stuff is just kind of survivability and stats. Same with this one, physical cold, stats, survivability. Ideally, if you can get 3 flat rolls on this, that would be amazing. Get, or maybe even 4 if you have the, one of those rings that gives you 4 prefixes. Basically, as many flats as possible, but prioritize physical and cold. That's what we want to do on our rings. And then for our belt, we're running Ingenuity. That way we can boost our rings a little bit more. I have a almost perfect Ingenuity. It wasn't that expensive. It was like 1 div. So if you guys want an Ingenuity, it's pretty easy to pick one up for a relatively low cost this season. If you want, you can corrupt it. You don't even need to run these if you don't want to. But personally, my character isn't doing enough damage in my opinion. So I kind of need the Ingenuity boost damage there. For gloves, we have physical and cold again. Of course, triple attributes would be great. Having attack speed on this would also be really good because, as I mentioned, Lightning Spear is a fairly slow attack. So having more attack speed, more skill speed is going to be beneficial. So you're going to want to get, of course, minimum requirement, the 2 flats, and then survivability if you need it, and then get attack speed. Boots, just move speed. Survivability. I only have a 25% move speed one. We can upgrade it for sure, but it's going to be costly. But yeah, it's really like all this gear was thrown together in like 1 div each, maybe some even less. So this is a fairly budget setup right now, and we're able to basically do this declare tier 15s. Now we also have an offhand setup if you noticed here, and that is for our single target. There's nothing really different here in terms of the equipment. It really is, again, another Tangle Tongue, another Omen Scepter, same type of stats, same type of deal. But we have it for a setup because we have a second skill tree setup, a secondary weapon set for our skill tree. And as you notice, I do have a Deepest Tower here for a swap when we go against bosses. Eventually, this build should be able to clear bosses in tier 15 maps without doing the swap. I'm going to show a video right here with somebody who is using Glacial Lance to one-shot tier 4 Zesht. So this single target on this character can definitely get to a point of one-shotting pinnacle bosses. But right now, my setup, my gear, everything, it just isn't quite there yet. Now, I will mention that in the video, they had a very, very specific setup with like ambrosia and like all these other things to make it so that they are maximizing their damage. This character, I would like it to be as simple as possible, as little swaps as possible, so that it's just more comfortable, right? But if you do want to go against pinnacle bosses, we probably will have to do a fancy swap. But for now, we do have a swap for Deepest Tower because I just don't have the gear required to even one-shot tier 15s without it. But if we put it on, we're able to one-shot tier 15s. So basically, whenever we go into boss, we'll swap our weapon set, we'll put on the Deepest Tower, and boom. And the reason why we do this on a weapon swap is because on our tree, we have this kind of cluster here on our second weapon set. This adds a lot of damage, right? 30%, 30%, 30%, 30%, makes our hits lucky. Another two 30% and a 60% increase in damage. So having that deepest tower setup is very, very nice and will help us a lot with our damage. So that's why we have that swap there. Eventually, again, I would like it to that we are able to not have to rely on this to one-shot tier 15s, and that will come with gear. But unfortunately, we are where we are. But yeah, so that is our equipment. Now for our gems setup, we are, of course, running Herald of Thunder, Cast on Freeze. That is kind of our bread and butter when it comes to the AoE clear. So on Cast on Freeze, we have Voltaic Mark, of course. Then we have Magnified Effect to make the Voltaic Mark bigger. We have Reach to make it bigger again. And then Innervate, because whenever we are killing shocked enemies with this, we are able to get Innervate and increase the amount of lightning damage that we're doing. Then on Herald of Thunder, we have Glaciation, we have Cold Infusion, and Lightning Mastery. Originally, for Herald of Thunder, I did have Innervate on there because that's what Sarge had, but I found that Herald of Thunder was never really killing enemies. So, like, they weren't killing shocked enemies. What ended up happening was Voltaic Mark was doing all the shocking and the killing. So, yeah, it ended up being that it was just better on here because this makes it a lot more consistent to proc. Now, for Glacial Lance, we are using Primal Armament. We are using Deliberation because we do have a Roa, which will increase our damage without any penalty for movement speed if we're on a Roa. We have Perpetual Charge to make it so that we can basically spam our spear without worrying about charges as much. We have Close Combat, which compared to a Lightning Spear setup, they use a Long Shot. Close Combat, in my opinion, is just a little bit better because, unfortunately, that this build just doesn't clear as fast as Lightning Spear does. Big surprise. So a lot of times we are pretty close to monsters, so I found that Close Combat is a much better support gem option for that reason. And then we have here Ice Bite for our Glacial Lance because, of course, more cold damage whenever we kill enemies. I don't know if this is the kind of min-max setup, but this is what works for me. Now, we use Combat Frenzy to generate our Frenzy charges, of course. So we have Profusion on here and Precision. Now, I'm actually going to skip over Sniper's Mark because we're going to talk about that in our single target setup. But we have our, and also we'll skip over Barrage. But we have Ghost Dance and Wind Dancer, of course, very standard. What we have for pretty much every evasion energy shield setup. We have Fast Forward on this, and we have Cannibalism. And then on Wind Dancer, we have Unbreakable, Maim, and Bludgeon. Now, Roa Mount, this is very standard, right? We ride on a Roa, and we have Loyalty, Elemental Army, and Meat Shield. So those are our gems and our setup. Now, the reason why I wanted to skip over Sniper's Mark and Barrage is because single target for this build is a little bit interesting and a little bit complicated. So the problem, or not the problem, I guess, the quirk about this build and ability, Glacial Lance, is that it has a two-part damage kind of stage. So first is the spear. When you throw it out, right, that does damage. But when you empower it with frenzy charges, it will also have an explosion. Now, one thing you'll notice is that the explosion is much stronger than the initial hit. So because of that, during our single target, ideally, we're going to want to have frenzy charges to be able to deal this extra explosion damage after the spear goes out. Now, the problem is that we have Barrage in our setup. So when we have our max frenzy charges, which is 7, we will be using Barrage, and Barrage basically will use up all of the frenzy charges that we have, and we have no more frenzy charges as a result of that. But our Glacial Lance still needs a frenzy charge, one frenzy charge to get that done. So what we will do is we will go and hit our Barrage when we go up to a boss. We're going to apply Sniper's Mark to the boss. Then we are going to stab it with a spear stab to get that one frenzy charge back. Then we will let go of our Glacial Lance. But if we are one-shotting the boss, you don't have to worry about that. Then you just go and hit the barrage, Sniper's Mark, poke it one time, get the frenzy charge, then you can let go and shoot your Glacial Lance. So there is a little bit of clunkiness, a little bit of quirkiness with this setup. I think in the video earlier that I showed with the Zesh one-shot, they didn't even need that. So maybe at some point we won't need it, but I'm not sure. At the moment, we do have to do that kind of setup when we go up against bosses. So again, I won't start from the beginning, right? Weapon swap, deepest tower when we go into the boss. Go into the boss, we pop our barrage, Sniper's Mark on the enemy, we stab it, then we let go of our Ice Spear, Glacial Lance. A little bit of a learning curve, mostly because we have not enough gear. If we have enough gear, we probably won't even need the second part of the Glacial Lance setup. Hey guys, Editing Weasel here. I just want to let you all know that I forgot to mention that you can actually just use Wind Serpent's Fury for single target, much like Lightning Spear if you really wanted to. But for me, I ideally want Glacial Lance to be doing all the work. So if you really wanted to, you can just use Wind Serpent's Fury and you'll do way more damage than Glacial Lance will. And you won't run into the barrage issue as well because Wind Serpent's Fury just does it by itself. It's great. It's like the best ability for single target right now with frenzy charges. So yeah. But yeah, that is our kind of the way that we deal damage to bosses. That is the gem setup. And with that, let's go into the tree. We mentioned a little bit earlier about how we have 2 weapon swaps, one for bossing and one for single target. Hopefully, again, at the end, we will not have to do a weapon swap on mapping, but for now we do, which is why we kind of have this setup. And hopefully later we'll just be able to do it without the weapon swap and only do it on pinnacle bosses and hopefully again one-shot them. But here is our setup right now. It's very, very reminiscent to what you would find on a typical Lightning Spear setup, but we do have a couple of differences here and there. For example, we do have a little bit more focus on skill speed because the skill just comes out so slowly. So we have, instead of going for like the crit nodes right here, we're going to go with the skill speed here. We're going to get the 3 skill speed nodes right there. And we also go up here, which we have Thin Ice. This is increasing the amount of freeze buildup that we have. The more we freeze, the more we will shock, the more we will do AoE. And increasing damage against frozen enemies is very, very good, especially when it comes to bossing. And then we are also using Heavy Frost on our second setup. Now, we are using Beacon of Aziz right now, but eventually, if we do, let's say, want to go up and try to one-shot pinnacle bosses, this, at the end of the day, will not give you all that much damage. Of course, ignoring elemental resistance is very nice, but we will be able to do that with Heavy Frost at the end. So we can swap off our Beacon of Aziz for a pinnacle boss setup. Then we can run a normal amulet with ideally crit damage and as much damage as possible. Then we go and one-shot the boss with that. That's why we kind of have that as a second swap. This is kind of useless for now. You could probably put it somewhere else, but that's just kind of the setup that we have for the tree. Very, very typical, very, very simple. Now, for our jewels, of course, I will have 1 maximum mana on kill just to be able to upkeep our mana while we're mapping. Of course, trying to get some critical chance on here as well. But in general, you might not even need the critical chance jewel especially if you have a higher crit chance Tangle Tongue. You just go all out damage, right? For our other gems, we have a cold damage in here, critical hit chance, maximum energy shield. Again, if you have a better Tangle Tongue, you probably won't need that. This one for damage, we have cold damage, critical damage bonus, and ideally, if you can get like elemental damage, because elemental damage will benefit both our lightnings, or our Herald of Lightnings, our Voltaic Marks, and also our Glacial Lance. Right now, because we have cold damage here, it's only benefiting our Glacial Lance. So if you can get all of those or all 3 of them, that would be the ideal. You want to have it in this order, right? Critical damage, elemental damage, and cold damage. That's kind of the order of priority that you want it in. But those are our jewels right now. And yeah, this is our tree. Very, very simple. If you've played Lightning Spear, this will look very familiar. Now, when it comes to anointing, As I mentioned earlier, we have Storm Charge anointed on our amulet, which will give us more crit chance, which is very valuable. And the increased elemental damage is also very nice. Now, some people will want to anoint or tell you that you should anoint Doomsayer, which is this one right here. It increases our Herald damage and Herald area effect. But the thing is about this build is that our Heralds aren't actually the thing that's doing area of effect. What's doing the area of effect is going to ultimately be our Voltaic Mark. This Herald of Thunder is going to hit an enemy, it's going to freeze them, and then it's going to apply Voltaic Mark, and then that Voltaic Mark is the one that's doing most of the AoE damage. So that's why Doomsayer is actually not that great on this build. The other node that some people will want to get is going to be this one right here, Overwhelming Strike. This is going to be pretty decent as well. I think from my calculations, the crit damage that you get from this is going to be less than the damage that you get from the node up here, Storm Charged. But the other node that you can possibly get is Vulgar Methods if you are super lacking on crit. If you feel like your crit is inconsistent, the extra 35% crit chance is going to be very nice and also giving you a little extra strength. The reduction in mana isn't very important because mana isn't really a problem for us. So yeah, all three of these nodes are kind of I guess, viable. Personally, I think Storm Charge is the best. But again, if you are struggling with crit chance, you could go Vulgar Methods, especially if let's say you don't have a very good Tangle Tongue. But yeah, that is the tree, that is the annoyance, and that is the video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the build guide, and hopefully you enjoy Glacial Lance. It's been a lot of fun for me. I'm going to continue playing this build on my stream, twitch.tv/misoxshiru. So if you want to see it in action, come and hang out with me there. And also, if you enjoyed the video and want to see more, the best way to support the channel is by hitting that sub button. It's completely free and it helps me a ton. But yeah, that about wraps it up. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see y'all on the next one.
You will be remembered as a traitor and a pirate.
I shall overcome. An easy trophy. Broke a sweat.
Just keeps getting stranger.
Rather not break my back.